Is this heaven? Oh, sick, a mixer. Welcome into Hope Deferred. Hope Deferred is a dark fantasy action RPG, dungeon crawler, Kings-like. And what I mean by Kings-like is we're kind of coming into a new territory where we're creating a new genre, but we don't have a name for it. So until we have that name, I guess I'll just call them Kings-like. And what a Kings-like is a game designed to play like Kingsfield. The old From Software game was their flagship fantasy game before Dark Souls and Elden Ring. And what's special about this game is it was made using the Blade of Moonlight engine, which is a special Kingsfield Maker style game where you got to build a game using Kingsfield assets, kind of like Little Big Planet or RPG Maker, those kinds of things. So this game actually uses assets from Kingsfield and the engine, within reason, because you can also build your own assets and then put those into the game as well. So there's plenty of customized assets in this game as well, but you will find Kingsfield assets in here too, which is pretty remarkable, honestly, considering that it's a game that you can go pick up on Steam. So from here, I guess we'll break the video up between story, gameplay, exploration, music, and closing thoughts. So getting into the story, you're going to get almost all of it from NPCs and characters. You're not going to really find any like environment story building. It all kind of comes down to like NPC narrative almost. Like you're looking for signs, and then you're also looking for NPCs, and those are going to give you the like 95% of the story. The best way to explain it is that you're going through like Dante's Inferno, like various different circles of hell, with the caveat of like there aren't really any circles that are like better or worse than others. It's all based on personal experience and personal traumas, stuff like that. And so as you are progressing through these areas, you're going to bump into people, obviously. You're going to bump into people. There are going to be signs, like literal road signs, that you can read or interact with. And then it'll either give you a little bit, or it'll have like a conversation where they will kind of give their experience on like what they feel like and how the world works. And sometimes they'll even give you like little nuggets of like how they got from the starting point into where they were at, which kind of gives you a little bit of a hint as to like what to do in the world if something gets extremely complicated, which is really interesting. There aren't really any recurring characters. There are recurring styles of characters. So like you're gonna bump into merchants, you're gonna bump into people that can like appraise gear to give you story, or at least give you story on that item. And then you're also gonna bump into people who can like give you spells or prayers, however you want to interpret that, which that is kind of broken up into like good magic and bad magic, and going into one tree kind of locks you out of that other tree. But those are kind of like the only instances where you're going to have reoccurring genres of people. It almost never is the same person, with like a very rare exception or two. Without giving any spoilers, you're essentially in this realm and things aren't okay, and it's your job to discover why in a manner that you think is appropriate for yourself. Now, this game has several different endings, but there's one in particular that I think is almost impossible for it to not be everyone's first playthrough. And we'll just kind of leave it at that. Definitely give this game several playthroughs. And once you like get one playthrough down, subsequent playthroughs are going to go much faster and much snappier. Because once you know where everything is and who to talk to, etc., where to go for specific key items to progress, you're not going to have any of that like exploration slog to slow you down from getting those items. And so you can just like really crank them out. I think speedrun communities are knocking this game out in like 10 minutes, 5 minutes if you want to do glitches. That's a little hearsay. I've not done that personally, but that is an example of how quick you can knock this out if you've already beaten it and you're ready to do additional runs, etc. So from here, we'll get into gameplay. Now, gameplay is going to be fairly simple. You're going to have like your movements. You're going to have your like you're going to be able to walk around. You're going to be able to attack, and you're going to be able to cast magic. And that's kind of it. All of the other intricacies of combat is going to be reliant on placement. So like if you want to take care of an enemy attack, it's more about either placement or movement to avoid that damage, which is exactly how like dealing damage is going to be. Like you're going to want to put yourself in a position that's advantageous for you to hit something while also making it more difficult for your opponent to hit you back. The only thing outside of that is there's a little bit of platforming. Now there isn't a jump button, but that doesn't mean that there isn't platforming. So the game handles platforming in a way where you are expected to like do leaps of faith, and your character has some kind of inertia that you hold on to whenever you leave a platform. And so that level of inertia can simulate kind of a platforming experience because you can only travel so far, and so you really have to like time your movements, and then sometimes there are obstacles that will prevent you from making it to that platform. So part of it will also be avoiding those obstacles while also trying to make it to the platform in free fall. I also alluded to multiple endings and different types of like good magic and bad magic, and both of those things from here are going to be tied to your morality system, which is almost entirely combat based. So how your character is perceived, whether you are good or evil, will be determined within combat. And I kind of prefer that over dialogue options, which aren't in this game. Your character is mostly a silent protagonist for all intents and purposes. But the reason why I enjoy that and why I'm okay with combat being the deciding factor on whether or not you're good or evil or somewhere in between is because it's more about actions over words. And so someone with a silver tongue could come across as good while their terrible actions say otherwise. And so in this game, you don't have that option for lying and still coming off as a good person. And depending on how you side will determine like what combat looks like for you without giving anything away. And I think that makes things very dynamic. Now there's some kind of video gamey ways to explain it like in universe, but I don't think I really want to. I think I want to leave this kind of esoteric, which is very fitting for this game. Esoteric is almost the like exact theme of the game. The last thing I'll mention before we move on to the next section is the mechanics that you're all used to from games, which is like rhythm and stamina kind of thing. A lot of that, as well as leveling up, all of that stuff is going to be handled kind of in the background, not because it's not important or as like robust as other RPGs or action RPGs, but because the developer doesn't want you to think about those kinds of things as you're going throughout the world. So you're going to improve your skills and your character over time in a lot of different ways, but you won't really see that happen visually. You'll just be in an area and you'll handle enemies better than you did previously. And it's very gradual, but when you're backtracking is when you really realize how much you've progressed. So this next section will be exploration, and this is going to be the bread and butter on which ending you'll actually get. Like you kind of can get shoehorned into one ending, but depending on how well you explore can get you the 4 other endings that are available. And this section is really esoteric. It's not nearly as simple as just walking from A to B or finding like a fancy ledge to find your MacGuffin or magic item or whatever you're looking for. Sometimes you're going to find items that don't seem like keys and they're supposed to go to a place or an NPC that you don't realize they need it. And I don't think that's bad because you're definitely going to beat the game without gaining any of the esoteric knowledge. It's there for repeated plays and new explorations and aha moments. And there are definitely parts in the game where the aha moments are like pre-programmed, and then there's definitely moments where you get an item and its description or name really like sets off something in your head, and you get so excited that you can now test this out, and it feels even more satisfying when you get to the location to test it out and it works. Oftentimes these bouts in exploration will result in like better equipment or better spells or unique like consumables, but again, some of this will lead to better endings, especially when you find like a new merchant or you find someone who is looking for a specific item. It's not quite a fetch quest, but it technically is, where this person will just say like, hey, I'm looking for maps of the area, and you won't really find them, but then you'll find someone else and they're like, hey, guess what, I'm a map maker. And so then you're like, oh my god, there's a guy that would like give me superpowers if I handed him a bunch of maps. Stuff like that. What also makes this exploration segment kind of unique and a little difficult is the fog of war can be really short-sighted. And so oftentimes you have to like really see the edge of a platform to know that you glide off of the map and land on another lower platform where there'll be an item. Typically, if you find something like that, it'll like loop itself back around Elder Scroll style and like plop you off back at your original location or relatively close, at least close enough where you recognize where you're at, which just further emphasis on how much platforming can be in this game for a game without jumping, which is very interesting. And lastly, the biggest reason why I'm going to defend the esoteric nature of these quests and fetch quests and endings will be because this game pays homage obviously to From Software's style of video game creation, and even today they still haven't like modernized their thought process on how quests and keys and traversal into new areas work. Even Elden Ring is still doing the esoteric method for NPC quests. Like, you'll get a quest from a person and they're like, ooh, I love grapes, and you're like, great, I have a grape in my pocket. And they're like, oh, pocket grapes are my favorite. And then they'll be like, I hope you continue giving me pocket grapes across your journeys. And you're like, great, yeah, I'd love to do that. And then you just have to know where they're going to be from here on out, because they're going to show up on a spot in the map, and there is a very high chance that's not going to be the route you're going to take in order to get to the next section that you need to be in. And this game kind of does that, and I can't fault it because it's paying homage to a From Software game, and everyone loves those games, and that's acceptable in those games. So I can't say that it's not acceptable here. And like I said initially, like, you can still beat the game having not completed any of those quests as well. So it's not even necessary in order to get the full experience of the game itself. It's mostly just there so that way you can get a complete understanding of how this world works. Next up, we have music, and if you are familiar with my channel at all, you know that this section can be kind of short, and that's because the music has been running the whole review so far, and so you've already gotten a chance to experience it for yourself, so there's not really much for me to describe there as you've already been digesting it. That being said, I find the music very interesting. It's like simultaneously good, but also doesn't fit typical video game music. But it definitely works for each of the biomes that there is music. Like, each biome has a different theme, and then there is music assigned to that biome, and the music really works for that biome. It helps send you to that place mentally in a very interesting way. I also got to chat with the dev, and he was able to shed some light on how he composed some of that stuff. He originally went to school for music and composed all the music himself, and even kind of broke down how, like, the different parts and stuff that he was able to, like, include, and how he acquired those pieces of sound effects and music cues and stuff like that. It was all very interesting. I also don't feel like it ever gets old, despite the loop being relatively short. Especially, like, if you get lost in a biome and you're looking for a specific item, or you're trying to find a specific spot in the map and you just can't find it. You just keep getting lost in the maze. Those segments are really when like sound effects can like start to like drain your psyche, but I don't think that happens with this soundtrack, which is really nice. So from here we have our closing thoughts. Overall, I think the game's fantastic. I think it's really fun to explore. It's really fun to get to know all these NPCs, collect items and spells, learn about the world. I think the hardest part of the game that I think people might not get past is how cold the opening is. The opening can be a very big slow burner, and as long as you can like get through and kind of figure out what the game's trying to do, I think you're gonna have a great time. But that very beginning, I think, could detract people from it, only because you don't quite understand what you're playing yet, especially if you didn't see like a trailer or watch someone else play it. Outside of that, I don't really have any notes. There are some things that we could have done quality life wise to like improve upon the Kingsfield experience. A lot of those ideas are kind of dated, like how stamina works could have been updated a little bit. Quests could have had some of the esotericism pulled out of it. But overall, if you really want to pay a true homage to a Kingsfield game, I don't think you really want to pull away from those ideas at all. The only thing you'll have to worry about is if you don't get enough of an audience, then I think you might need to pull away from those ideas a little bit. But overall, I genuinely can't emphasize enough how much there isn't really too many elements of this game that I would want to change in order for like a better experience. Getting into some of those changes, like maybe having items or equipment, or even the ability to like improve your stamina regen ability, would kind of help. I think giving items their own description rather than trying to find a person to tell you what the items do would also really help. I understand that like those things happen in a Kingsfield game, but like it's so archaic. It doesn't need to be that esoteric. But again, huge praise. I think what is there is very compelling and very interesting. Even sections where you're forced to do an entire level of platforming. Speaking of esotericism, if you want to find more content like this, come find me on Twitch or subscribe. You can even find my VODs on YouTube and Twitch. Anyways, have a good one.